Thank you very much for coming. First of all, it's going to be Mateo. Mateo comes from the authorities, from the government.
Well, not the government.
Sorry.
An independent authority.
The independent authorities, Comisión Nacional del Mercado de la Competencia. Okay. Thank you very much for coming here because I think that we, the citizens, think sometimes that the government want to keep some part of the business as establishment. They don't want to move. And we as citizens, we don't understand some decisions from the authority where you work. But probably you can explain a little bit more. Thank you for coming. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Oh, well,
That's yours.
Oops. No, I don't have a presentation, so thanks. Well, thank you very much, the organizers, for inviting me here. It's a real pleasure. Presentations have been great up to now, so many thanks for that. What I want to say first is that, well, it doesn't work really. What I say here is my opinion and my views. They do not necessarily represent those of the Spanish Competition Markets Authority, and maybe some decisions of its board, I don't really understand them really well. So,
Say it.
yeah. Well, the last thing was an opinion. Well, after the disclaimer, I begin. Technological innovations and technological progress always affect how markets work, always affect social interactions, and always pose challenges and opportunities for policymakers. It has always been like this. Technological innovations are regulatory disruptive. And big data is no different. Big data is a huge technological innovation that combines more availability of data. Data today is more abundant than in the past, with new features of data. Data is more real-time. Oops, doesn't work, huh? Data is more real-time. It has greater scope. It has greater dimensionality, greater complexity. In addition, we have cheaper capacity to store this data, and we have new statistical methods and new statistical tools in order to analyze this data. And this is what entails big data as a technological innovation. In my talk, I will cover the implications of big data for competition, for how markets work, and policymaking and regulation. I will cover just two issues. First, the pro-competitive benefits of big data, and second, how big data allows us to improve policymaking. In particular, how big data allows us to remove regulatory restrictions and competition in order to foster competition and to increase welfare. Why is big data pro-competitive? Well, if you look at data-driven markets, you see that they are characterized by intense competition, and the empirical evidence shows that benefits for consumers are unprecedented. Entry is intense. Entry barriers are low. We see, for instance, that innovative entrants displace large established firms which had much more data. In fact, if we see if you look at the history of the digital economy, it offers many examples. For instance, Facebook. Facebook today is a big company, but it was nothing at its origin. Another one, it's Tinder, for instance. Tinder in 2010, it didn't even exist. And today is one of the most popular applications in online dating. So this confirms that what is important in order to be a successful entrant is to offer an innovative service, an innovative product. And data is not really relevant as an entry barrier. As I said, consumer benefits from in data-driven markets are huge. Search and comparison is easier. Consumers have much more information available. For instance, I can have ratings of the plumber that is going to come to my house on Saturday to fix my bathroom. I can have several thousands of ratings of the hotel I'm going to sleep in tonight. I can have several ratings of the Uber driver that would drive me home in the city of Madrid in case the Spanish government didn't establish restrictions to competition in this market. But the government does establish these restrictions, imposing a social cost on Spanish society. There's more product discovery in data-driven markets. For instance, I can buy books I had never heard of. I can go to places I had never heard of. There is more product improvement. Companies can use the information that we provide them with in order to offer new services, better services. They give us recommendations on books, on friends, on people, on sites, on news. And this increases consumer welfare. And of course, free services. Data is available. Data is available, and data is valuable. So companies have the incentives to compete, offering free services like Google Maps, for instance, or Google Scholar, in order to obtain this data. And there's no problem about that. So even though we have these huge benefits, some people pose concerns in terms of competition. They see risks in big data. One of the most popular arguments is a large company with lots of data can use this data as a competitive advantage and block the entry of competitors, foreclose the entry in their markets. However, we must not forget the economic features of big data. Big data is pretty freely available, raw data. Big data is non-excludable, it's non-rivalrous. Big data is ubiquitous. So this kind of economic characteristics of big data, they ameliorate the concerns in terms of competition risks. And in fact, the empirical evidence regarding these risks is really low. So my first lesson for competition authorities is that they have to take into account that benefits are really huge, and that is what the empirical evidence shows, and risks are low. Data-driven markets are working well for consumers. The other idea I wanted to discuss is how big data may allow us to improve policymaking. Fascinating area is how big data can improve government services in many areas, such as health, education, security, transport, traffic. However, today I want to talk about another issue, which is how big data allows us to remove or modify regulations in order to move forward a smarter regulation, better regulation that will foster competition and welfare, that will foster competition and increase welfare. Markets are usually the best tool that we have as a society to ensure efficiency, to achieve growth. However, sometimes markets fail. By the way, as the public sector does, because the public sector also fails. Economists, as you know, talk about market failures. Some of these failures are information problems or externalities. These kind of market failures may lead to inefficient outcomes. And market failures have led policymakers to intervene in markets in the past and in the present. As you also know, over the last 15 years, we have seen the development of online marketplaces. One of my favorites is Amazon. Amazon is a virtual online marketplace which has increased consumer welfare hugely. Another kind of market is eBay or Craigslist, or of course, Airbnb and Uber. These are more recent ones. These markets have become successful due to two things. First, they reduce transaction costs, and they ensure matching between supply and demand very effectively. But the second one, the most important one, is that they ensure trust. They have granted trust, and they ensure that supply and demand in these markets can carry out or undertake trustworthy transactions. Big data lies at the heart of these virtual online marketplaces. Of course, other technologies too, but big data, we wouldn't have these virtual online marketplaces without big data. For instance, we wouldn't have the ratings in Amazon or in Airbnb without big data. We wouldn't have the price mechanism of Uber without big data. So one interesting thing about these markets is that they contribute to solving these market failures. They are very effective in doing that. For instance, Airbnb offers its traders reputation systems and identity verification systems that ensure safer transactions. So the risk of market failure is lower. Uber and Lyft, they also use these reputation systems in order to ensure a high quality of their services. Indeed, quality is much higher in a company like Uber than in the traditional taxi industry. They are not doing really well in ensuring quality compared to Uber. Uber or Lyft also use these big data technologies in order to ensure the price mechanism I was talking about. So we can have fierce price competition in the taxi industry thanks to these applications. An interesting thing is that quality regulation and safety regulation in the taxi industry or in the lodging industry, or price regulation in the taxi industry, was grounded, policymakers established these regulations, based on market failures. I'm not going to discuss if they were always justified or not. That would be another topic. However, these regulations also restricted competition. Quality regulation, safety regulation, this hinder competition. Price regulation in the taxi industry has impeded competition for decades. The interesting thing is that virtual online marketplaces, based on technologies such as big data, they contribute to solving these market failures. So traditional regulations become unnecessary, unjustified in many domains. For instance, Airbnb, as I said, offers this reputation mechanism, so regulations regarding the cleanness of a room become unnecessary. Price regulation in the taxi industry becomes unnecessary. Quality regulation in the taxi industry becomes unnecessary with the reputation systems of these new platforms. Indeed, these reputation systems are much more effective than traditional quality regulation in order to ensure quality. And that is a fact. And that was my second idea. How these new virtual online marketplaces, which heavily rely on big data, allow us to remove traditional regulatory frameworks which restrict competition and which are not justified. Maybe they weren't justified in the past, some of them. Many of them weren't justified. So basically, to sum up, big data is a huge technological innovation. Big data has huge pro-competitive effects. Data-driven markets are benefiting consumers hugely. And in addition, big data allows us to remove all these regulations I was talking about that hindered competition. Therefore, big data is a very effective tool. It's an awesome tool in order to foster competition and increase welfare for all. Thank you very much.